Hello, everyone, and welcome. We have folks starting to trickle in gradually to our Zoom. So we're not going to get started immediately, but we'll start in a moment or two. For those who are already on the call, I'll just welcome you to our webinar on Netanyahu's one-state solution, in quotes, the reality on the West Bank. And I see we have quite a good number of folks joining us, and I'm just going to give just another few seconds as I see more people still joining. Okay. All right. I think I'm going to go ahead and get started. So let me welcome everyone to our call today on Netanyahu's one-state solution, again, in quotes, the reality on the West Bank under this new, although at this point not so new anymore, ultra-right-wing Israeli government. We have two great speakers here today in Hagit Ofran and Issa Amro, and I'm going to be introducing them in just a little bit. I am Debra Shushan, J Street's policy director, and it's great to be with all of you. I want to give a few words of introduction and just say that the Netanyahu government over the last 8 months that it's been in power has really been carrying out revolutionary changes on both sides of the Green Line. So both within Israel itself and over the Green Line within the occupied West Bank, we have seen some extremely significant changes. Today, we're really going to focus our attention on the reality within the West Bank. There, we have a situation in which an ultra-right-wing settler with a long-established agenda, this is Bezalel Smotrich, in his position as a minister within the defense ministry, he's also finance minister, has assumed authority over most aspects of civilian life in the Israeli-controlled portions of the West Bank, in what is really tantamount to de jure annexation. At the same time, we see very serious advances in de facto annexation measures on the ground in terms of settlement units, a record number established already in 2023, retroactive authorization of outposts, massive budget allocations towards settlements and infrastructure that serves the settlers and settlements. And so what we really see with Smotrich, with Itamar Ben-Gvir, who of course is a settler with a long racist Kahanist history, who lives in the Kiryat Arba settlement, very close to where Issa is joining us from today, and who is Israel's national security minister. We see settlers emboldened, a major increase in settler violence, which is something I'm sure we'll talk about today as well. We have coalition leaders who see the Supreme Court as well as an obstacle to the annexation that they're working on carrying out, and they're attacking as a result its independence. And so we really see a connection between what's happening in the West Bank and what's happening within Israel in terms of the judicial coup and the attack on democracy that's being carried out. So we have a lot to discuss today with our two speakers in terms of what the government is doing on the ground, what the consequences are for both Israelis and Palestinians, and also how the United States can show stronger leadership. As with all of our webinars, one thing that we always do is make sure to take as many audience questions as possible. We do have, right now I'm looking at, we have over 300 participants on the call. And so I do anticipate a very large volume of questions. So I can't promise that we'll take all of them, but we will certainly take as many as we can. And so as with our usual protocol, you can find the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And whenever you like, you can put your questions there, and we'll get to as many as we possibly can. So with all of that said, I want to get to introducing the two speakers that we have with us today and that we're so pleased to have with us. I'll start with Issa Amro. He is a Palestinian human rights defender based in Hebron, who I'm sure is known to many of our viewers. He is a co-founder of Youth Against Settlements, which is an activist group that mobilizes young Palestinians to oppose occupation with nonviolence. Issa grew up in Hebron's Old City near Shuhada Street. It's an area that is now largely closed to Palestinians and only accessible to Jewish settlers and the Israeli military. Issa has been recognized by the United Nations, by members of Congress for his activism and his efforts to document human rights violations by Israeli soldiers and settlers against Palestinians in Hebron. And Issa, we are very pleased and grateful to have you here today.
Me too. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I hope that I can contribute to the listeners and to the audience today.
We're sure you will, Issa. Thank you so much. And now I want to introduce our other speaker, Hagit Ofran. Hagit is a researcher and activist, and I'm sure many of our listeners know her as well. She is recognized as one of Israel's top experts on issues related to West Bank settlements, including in East Jerusalem. She is director of Peace Now's Settlement Watch team, and she publishes, as part of that team, a comprehensive database and reports on settlement development and Israeli policy towards settlements. And this is a key resource for anyone interested in settlements, be they politicians, diplomats, the media, and the broader public. And so she is a fantastic expert to have with us today for this discussion. Hagit, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Debra. Hi, Issa, and hello to everybody.
Wonderful. Well, with that, we're going to just dive right in. And Issa, I want to start with you. And you are joining us today from your home in Hebron. I recognize it because I had the distinct pleasure of visiting you there just last month when I was on a very impactful trip to the West Bank, including to Hebron. And I recognize that many of our viewers will not have had that opportunity to travel widely in the West Bank, to visit Hebron, which I do recommend. It's a very important learning experience in terms of understanding the occupation and the reality on the ground in the West Bank. And so, Issa, I wonder if you could introduce us to your home, to the West Bank, for viewers who may not be so familiar.
Okay, thank you, Debra. I want to start from here, where you've been a few weeks ago, and I want to invite everybody to come and see by their eyes the reality of the facts on the ground, which Netanyahu government is establishing all over West Bank since few years, even before Smotrich being join the new coalition and the new government. I'm in Hebron. Hebron is a Palestinian city, and the majority of the population are Palestinians. We have few hundred settlers living inside the city since 1979. And the settlers are working very hard to expand and to remove the Palestinian identity of the city center of Hebron. And the main milestone was Baruch Goldstein massacre 1994, when Baruch Goldstein went into the mosque and killed 29 Palestinians. Then 1997, we had the Hebron redeployment agreement, which divided the city for H1 and H2. H1 under the Palestinian Authority control, and H2 under the Israeli military control, to be part of the two-state solution, which was supposed to be in 1999. Unfortunately, after the beginning of the second intifada, the Israeli settlers and the army together worked to close the city and the city center. And nowadays we have in this area 22 checkpoints in less than 1 kilometer square. We have around 100 movement barriers, which is blocking the people from moving from one neighborhood to another, from one street to another. We have around 1,800 shops closed because of the closure policy. 1,000 Palestinian apartments became empty. We have streets where we are not allowed to walk or to drive in the area. So the house where I was born as Issa, I'm not allowed to visit. I'm not allowed to live there anymore. It's very close to the Ibrahimi Mosque and to a settlement there. It's called Abraham Avino. And I'm not allowed to walk in the streets where I grew up, where I was raised. And for sure, it means the Palestinians. The ambulance has restriction to reach certain neighborhoods, the Palestinian ambulance, certain neighborhoods in the city, especially my house here. It needs a special coordination, no services, no social life. You don't feel safe in your house. It's not easy. And by time, it's really getting much worse, especially after the new government and the new measures in West Bank. So we feel the difference between previous governments and this government, especially that the settlers who are living in Hebron are the supporters and the followers and the members of Itamar Ben-Gvir political party, especially Baruch Marzel, who is the leader of the Israeli Kahanists, who is very fanatic, very extreme, and he lives just a few meters from my house. And I know Itamar Ben-Gvir from Marzel's, because he used to come to Marzel's house to have meetings, or we were organizing non-violence actions and activities to help the families near Kiryat Arba. He lives in Givat HaAvot, near Kiryat Arba, at the police station. From the main enemy of the police to the chief of police, almost, that's Itamar Ben-Gvir. And the situation in West Bank, we see a lot of facts on the ground in West Bank. If you drive from the north to the south, you will see how the Israeli occupation is creating facts on the ground for annexation. You see highways, new roads, and the new roads, it's designed in a way to hide the Palestinian communities. So we have a new highway between Gush Etzion and Hebron, and you don't see, for example, Al Arub refugee camp. You don't see Beit Umar as a village. You need to do turns to get into this. So you don't see them. We don't exist at all. So the people who are driving from their cars from Jerusalem to Hebron, they don't see Palestinians around. They are hiding them completely. And this is the future. This is the plan of Netanyahu. One not solution. One state, one apartheid state from the river to the sea. It's not a solution for him. He doesn't want any solution, because if we want to say one state solution, it will take us to equal rights. But this is not what Netanyahu and his government and Smotrich and Ben-Gvir want. What is new in West Bank? The quantity and the quality of the settler violence, and the behavior of the Israeli settler soldiers, and the behavior of the Israeli police in regard of the settler violence. If you want me to add more to that, maybe you have other questions. I'm ready to go deeper. It depends on the time and depends on what level you want me to talk.
Well, that's great. It's not great. And I had the opportunity to really see so much of what you're talking about with my own eyes, Issa, but it's a very helpful introduction. I would love for you to, and there's a lot more for us to dig into, but before I turn to Hagit in just a moment, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the settlements in and around Hebron, a little bit more than you have, the settlers who are there. You spoke about Baruch Marzel, of course. In addition, I'd note that there's actually a member of the Israeli cabinet who lives in Hebron. This is Orit Struk, the Minister of National Missions, lives not at all far from you in Hebron. And I, when I was there, I had a chance to see some of the settlers, and in fact, to witness settler violence while I was there. And I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about your experience with the settlements and settlers in and around Hebron. And my screen appears to be frozen, which makes me think that it's, I think my connection may have frozen. Am I back? Hagit, Issa, are you?
I hear you, but I'm waiting Hagit. I don't see Hagit.
Okay, okay. All right.
I thought you were
Hopefully
asking Issa.
Okay, good. It seems like we're back. I think that might have been my connection. Okay, seems like we're back. So Issa, the question for you is to talk a little bit about settlers and settlements, your experiences, and your neighbors, other Palestinians' experiences with them in and around Hebron.
Okay. The main issue with the settlers who are living very close to my house and who are living inside the city or outside the city as Kiryat Arba settlement, that the settlers are living under the Israeli civilian law, and we as Palestinians, we live under the Israeli military law. By the military law, we are not allowed to practice nonviolence resistance. It's illegal according to the Israeli military law. I was arrested, indicted, and even convicted in the military court for my pure nonviolence activities and actions in Hebron. And by the military law, you are guilty until you are proven innocent. But the settlers, who are very fanatic and very extreme, they are under the Israeli civilian law, and there is no political will to make them accountable for their violence. So in the past, in the last 20 years of my activism, we experienced a lot of settler violence, but these days, the quantity and the quality of the settler violence is increasing, and it's really making me more afraid, and it's not easy to describe. So from verbal attacks to physical attacks to strong stones to damaging property to steal to do many violent attacks, and the quantity of the settler violence is increasing. I used to have maybe once, twice a week attacks from settlers. Now sometimes it's 2, 3 per day, and without any real accountability from the police or the army. And you see the soldiers either pro the settler violence, they don't act, even they try to protect them during the violence, or they are very silent and stay away because of the power the settlers have. The settlers in Hebron are well known for being the followers of Meir Kahana, Kach movement, and they are really the leaders of the very far right wing. We have 4 settlements compound in the city. Tel Rumeda, Baruch Marzel, who is very infamous for his racism and for his fascist ideology. In the city, we have Orit Struk. And Orit Struk, she's a minister in the Israeli cabinet now, and she's very fanatic and very extreme. And she lives in the city center, few hundred meters, even less than a few hundred meters, maybe 150, 200 meters far from here, or maybe 300. And it's where I was born, exactly, in Abraham Avinu. And near her house, a few months ago, the Israeli settlers demolished 6 private Palestinian shops. This is something very important. Next to her house, and for sure she saw it from her window if she was in the house, that they on the night a bulldozer demolished 6 private Palestinian closed shops by the Israeli military, because we have around 550 Palestinian shops inside the closed area, closed by military orders. The rest are closed because of the closure policy. I see many visitors from the US. I see that Hebron Fund, an Israeli, it's an American NGO organization, give them a lot of money. I see them doing a lot of media, a lot of tours. Even they bring volunteers, American volunteers to, I saw them, maybe 2 months ago, making the road next to my house in a Palestinian private land, American volunteers. I told them, what are you doing? Go back home and do voluntary work there, or, try to make voluntary work where it's legal, not illegal. The spokesperson of the settlers in Hebron, Yishai Fleischer, is the main assistant of Itamar Ben-Gvir, and he's a consultant, and he was the foreign spokesperson of Itamar Ben-Gvir. So this kind of people, the majority of them are violent. I was attacked many times, me personally, by the settlers, physically attacked by settlers, slapped, hit by all over my body, kicked, got stones here, got stones here. So the main issue, Debra, this is something very important. Violence exists everywhere. We have violent Palestinians, we have violent Americans. Violence, with different levels exists in the communities. But what is abnormal in Hebron? Police sees settlers doing violence. They don't arrest them. Army see them attacking us. They try to put pressure on us not to defend ourselves or to defend our property, and if you try to defend, you are arrested. So this is the main issue, that there is no accountability. This year, from January 1st to January 10th, I filed 6 complaints to the Israeli police about different incidents happened to me, only me. And with videos, I gave videos, and one time even the police witnessed a settler attacking me, threatening me, and the 6 files were closed after maybe 2 weeks without any accountability. So the main issue for me, that two sets of law, 2 systems, and at the same time, there is no political will to make the Israeli settlers accountable. One time I was slapped by one settler. I went to civil court. I won in the civil court to make her pay me compensation, but she didn't pay. And nobody to enforce the law on her to pay me compensation for attacking, slapping me in the street. And the police themselves, they didn't make her accountable. So I went to civil court. Imagine that the police was there when I was attacked by her and nothing happened. So this kind of settlers, who the army is following what they want. So they close the streets, they close the markets, and you see them going wild. And they did many things to please them. This government, for the first time, for example, they allow them to enter H1 more than normal times. They used to give them, I don't know the exact number, 4 times. This year they said, we are very proud to make it open so they can visit H1, go to H1. Furthermore, and settlers going to H1 means closing few hundred Palestinian shops, closing Palestinian streets, making almost a curfew for Palestinians. It means they suffer. And nowadays, the Jewish holidays are coming. In the past, when I was a child, Jewish holidays were happy days for me, because I see people, I talk to people in Hebron there. Now, Jewish holidays means emergency for me. We know what it means, emergency for me and for my people here and for the neighbors. You may not leave the house, you may not go to your school, you will be afraid because many settlers will visit, and a lot of soldiers, and you will be attacked. Last Passover, I was attacked here. They attacked the house. In Purim, they attacked the house here. And not only my house, they attacked almost the majority of Palestinian houses. They attack with video evidence. They attack violence. They destroy, they damage, they throw stones, they beat you physically, but no accountability. So the settlers in Hebron, many of them are Americans. And I see many American visitors. And I see a lot of American money is coming to support them and to help them to build more settlements in the city and to have a quality life, even better than the life of the Israelis inside Tel Aviv. they have a quality life on the expense of our basic rights as Palestinians who are living inside the city here.
Thank you so much for all of that, Issa. And again, I can say that I in my short time in Hebron, I saw a lot of that, and really appreciate you sharing all of that with us. Hagit, I want to zoom out a little bit. We've focused a lot on the situation in Hebron, which is very important because I think in a lot of ways it's really a microcosm where so much of the occupation, you see it all concentrated very much in one spot. But I wonder if, Hagit, you could help us to zoom out a little bit as we think about the current state of play under the new government. And you obviously have been observing and documenting settlements and the occupation for many years. What do you see as the key changes, and how profound would you say that they are within a period of just several months?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's always a question because previous governments, including the last one that was not a regular right-wing government, continued the settlement activity and continued the occupation and did not go in any different direction. So do we see now a real change, or is it just the same or similar trends that now are going a little faster? And that's always the question. And I think because we've had many years now of very extreme right-wing governments, the changes that we see now seems not so radical because we are already in a very radical situation. But I do want to go through several things that this government already managed to do. This government started sometime, I think, in December, and in less than a year, they did many profound things. One of the first decisions was to nominate Minister Smotrich to be a minister in the Ministry of Defense, and to give him authorities that were never given to minister before. Those authorities were in the hands of the Minister of Defense, but he actually established a settlement authority within the military, which is now running the settlements issues and running also Palestinian issues in Area C. I don't have enough time to dive into the details, but it means that one of the most extreme settlers is now in charge of decisions, not only when and where to build and budgets and things of the sort in settlements, but also on demolitions of Palestinian houses, on non-demolition of settler illegal constructions, etc. I think also in terms of the international law, what we see is also a dramatic change, because officially Israel is occupation is not supposed to be done by another country. And when you have an occupation, you must do it through the military, which is not directly the government. You know, the government is obliged to the interests of the Israelis and not to the Palestinians. And so you give the authority to the military, which is not directly the government of Israel, and they're supposed to take into consideration also Palestinian interests and take care of them. And now we actually took this away, and we put a civilian body which is directly reporting to the minister Smotrich. So it is another way of annexation, if you want. And I think it's a dramatic change. It's also changing the legal advisors, and it means that there are less and less balances on this policy. So that was done already in February. Also in February, the government decided to establish 9 new settlements, which are retroactively approving 10 illegal outposts. Just to compare, since 1992 until today, until February, the government officially established 6 settlements, all of them after 2012, and this government already did 9. And another dramatic change is the government decided to cancel a government decision from the 90s that actually made every development and construction in the settlements dependent on a decision of the Minister of Defense, meaning any plan, any promotion of plan, any construction start, any tender, any allocation of land, all of these things had to go through the Minister of Defense. And what the government decided is that we don't need this anymore. The settlers or the settlers' bodies can go on and plan and allow themselves to build without the government authorizing. Now, this can be changed any day by the government, but this means, first of all, much easier way for the settlers to push forward construction, but also legally, when the next government would say, okay, I want to put on hold this plan, it will be harder because the legal situation now is that you have a contractor, he has a contract, he has a promise that this plan will go through without any intervention of the government. Suddenly you want to intervene, it's going to be a legal obstacle. Maybe they will need to compensate it if they want to stop it. What we had before was that the contractor knew that every day the minister can call off this plan, and so they could take it into consideration. So that's another dramatic step. And also, whenever they're now approving new plans, and by the way, this government is already managed to promote plans for more than 12,000 units, which is a new record in 1 year that we know of. When international bodies would want to say to the government that it's not okay, the government will say, well, we didn't approve it, it's just happened, it's not our call. So that's another dramatic change. And I know I don't have much time, so I just want to put another very, very important development, and I think it has to do with the violence that we see. I think another aspect of settlements is not only that they build another house and take another dunam of land. It is also the dispossession and the expulsion of Palestinians from the lands. And what we're seeing in the recent months is communities of Palestinians that are being attacked systematically by the Israeli army and by the settlers that are actually starting to leave their houses and to try to find the new places because they cannot stand the attacks anymore. Today in Haaretz, in Hebrew, I wish they translate it into English. There is an article by Avishai Mohar, one of the activists, that is actually describing at length how this process happens. And I think this violence of settlers was always there. And the restriction over Palestinians in Area C was always there. But what we see now is with the policies of putting more and more outposts that are called the farms, agriculture farms, where the settlers are there in order to expel the Palestinians, and they do it every day by harassing the Palestinians. And the government is now backing them, although officially they are not legal. And Minister Smotrich is saying that he's working on a plan how to make it legal and how to make it systematic. And we are seeing, I think, all this violence that were there all the time. Now that you have people that were leading this violence, like Itamar Ben-Gvir, in the government, it's almost inevitable that this will become like crazy violence, and we see people are even killed by settlers in much more than in the past.
Thank you so much for that, Hagit. I want to take the opportunity actually to build off of the very last thing that you were talking about, because it was one of the most important things that I saw when I was in the West Bank, was around in that area between the outskirts of Ramallah to the outskirts of Jericho, kind of the central Jordan Valley, where you have agricultural Palestinian communities, and you have the proliferation of what you've just talked about, these herding outposts. The settlers are able to establish, and you just need, one or a couple of people with a herd of animals who establish an outpost, who then harass the Palestinians nearby, under the protection of the army. And we are seeing increasing numbers of these small communities that are just leaving. And, in going around that area, with an incredible volunteer from the organization Looking the Occupation in the Eyes, who's been, working with visiting a lot of these communities for years. And he looked at me and said, in a period of months, this whole area will be empty of Palestinians. They can't live in these circumstances. They're going to leave. And we're seeing that play out, community after community. And so I really do appreciate you talking about that in your really excellent and comprehensive overview, Hagit. So we have, as I anticipated, quite a lot of questions in the chat. And so I'm gonna, start turning to these questions and getting to as many as we can, mindful that we are not going to be able to get to all of them. But I want to turn to you, Issa. We have quite a number of questions that are for you, and some that are for Hagit as well. And we have a question here from Barbara Baruch. I'm going to actually give you a couple questions. She asked if you could expand on why settlers going into H1 means the closing of Palestinian shops. And I'd love for you, Issa, when you answer that, to talk a little bit more broadly as well about the impact that settlements have on Palestinian livelihood, Palestinian shop owners. And also, I'm going to throw one more question at you because we have a lot of questions here. There's a question from Mary Kuhn who asks about water. Have there been more changes this year in the access Palestinians have to water? So if you could talk about those things, they're both very important.
Yes. For example, I'm not allowed to walk in Shuhada Street because the settlers don't feel comfortable with me to walk in the same street. This is what they said, that, they don't want to see Palestinians there. They want to remove the Palestinian identity of certain areas. And at the same time, they use the excuse of security. I don't think, when they get to anywhere, there is a security need to close shops. But the army closed the shops to make the settlers feel that they can do whatever they want. It's about supremacy, it's about power, and it's about ownership. They want to remove Palestinians from there so that the visitors of that areas don't think that these areas are Palestinians. In the same time, they say security, but in Hebron especially, they do it to make the settlers feel comfortable. For example, every Saturday in the old city of Hebron, there is a settler store. The settlers, they go out to Kasaba in Hebron, but the army doesn't close the shops. But when they visit certain area, another area, they close all the shops, hundreds of shops, and they close the city center, and they go to visit a tomb, only, a tomb of, Atneel bin Knas. And this is about controlling the area. This is how I explain it, and to make the settlers feel better. And that leads us to the impact of the closure, the impact of the settler presence in the city. Hebron city center was one of the richest areas in Palestine. Now it's the poorest in Palestine. The poorest, unemployment rate is more than 70% in this area when the restricted part of H2. And poverty rate is more than 80%. It's a huge impact. We have much less visitors, much less, customers going to the city center of Hebron because of the closure policy. People are afraid to go. There are, the bus stops are being closed, and even, the main bus station in the city was with the military, and they passed it to the settlers recently, and now they are building a new settlement, and they want to build around 31 new units in the city. And about water, before water, we don't live a normal life in the city center of Hebron under the occupation because of the presence of the settlers. So 250,000 Palestinians, they suffer from many losing many basic rights. So closing the shops so the settlers can have their own kindergarten, closing the shops so the settlers will have a basketball playground. So Palestinians lose basic rights because of the settlers existing in Hebron. It doesn't mean that we don't want Jews to live in Hebron. We don't want settlers. We don't want occupiers to live in Hebron. This is not about Judaism. It's about occupiers, and it's about settlers. The impact, we have a social impact. We have religious impact on Palestinians, because in the area closed, it's the main Muslim cemetery for the 250,000 Palestinians. It's the main mosques. It's the main markets, the wholesale market, the main vegetable and fruits market, and all the, I call it the special markets, the carpenter, the blacksmith, the carpets market. It's all closed because of the closure policy. And the first closure was after the Ibrahimi Mosque massacre. And I noticed the difference because I lived there. I grew up there. I'm raised there. I noticed the difference that by time they are removing the identity of the Palestinian identity of the city, and they're trying to show that Hebron is part of Israel. So annexation is starting in Hebron. Annexation, if you want to understand annexation, and this model of segregation and separation, I call it the Kahanist model. It's going to be all over. So they will take the model of Hebron, division, closure. The streets are divided according to the nationality, according to the religion. This will be in East Jerusalem. This will be in Lod. This will be in Jaffa. All the mixed cities, it's all the mixed cities, the army will divide. This is the model Ben-Gvir Smotrich one. Something else I want to, a little bit go further about who is Smotrich. This is something very important as a person. He was the leader of Rakavim. Rakavim It's an NGO, one of the richest NGO working in Area C. Rakavim main mandate is to remove the Palestinians from Area C. Now Smotrich is the finance minister and a minister in the defense ministry who's responsible about West Bank. So the master of West Bank is Smotrich, who's deciding how much water I get. So about, the water, the question about water, yes, this year in Hebron, we got less water than usual. And so we are struggling. We don't have, and really I don't have water in my house now because the water didn't come to me since maybe 3 weeks. So we usually gather water in tanks when it comes once a day, every 2 weeks. Now, because of the shortage of water, it comes, every 3 weeks to 4 weeks. So I have, my water tanks are empty because of that. We had many visitors last weeks. So no enough water for personal use. So this is what Smotrich is doing. Smotrich is trying to restrict the life of the Palestinians. For the first time since many years, I saw them poured cement, concrete in water holes, which Palestinian farmers near Al-Fawar refugee camp were using. So there is a real war on Palestinians in Area C. In one hand, you see settler violence and pogroms and settlers getting into Palestinian villages, Palestinian communities in Area C. Army is doing nothing to protect, and police is doing nothing to make settlers accountable. And even the Porca killing is one of the examples that a Palestinian was killed by a settler who raided the village to attack Palestinians, and then the court accepted the self-defense excuse of the settlers who was an attacker. So there is really a phenomena of settler violence without any real reaction from the international community. Maybe the international community, they told me, Issa, now we are using Jewish terrorism as a phrase about settler violence. It's used by even Israeli officials, it's used by American officials. It's new, but we need to really describe the real situation on the ground. It's much more than that. It's well-organized attacks on Palestinians, and it's part of the plan of the settlements movement and the settler violent groups. On the other hand, it's supported and backed by the government. When I was attacked last February, the Israeli National Security Minister seconded what the soldier did to me. Instead of making the soldier accountable, the Israeli National Security Minister protected and backed the soldier who was obvious on video attacking a human rights defender in front of an American famous writer. So something very important: less water, less services for Palestinians in Area C, and even in general, there are much less cooperation, between Palestinian Authority and the Israeli government about civilian affairs. They want to keep the security coordination, but they want to reduce the amount of cooperation about making the life of Palestinians easier. And the cabinet refused to establish an industrial zone for the Palestinians in Hebron. They refused to make it easier for me to travel to Jordan from Alembi. So it's about being Smotrich is working now as the civil administration boss who control all my life details: import, export, business, water, electricity, movement in West Bank. So he's making it easier for the settlers. He's making it more attractive for the settlers, and he's making it more difficult for the Palestinians. And smart and Bigver said it openly that the rights of movement of his family and his people, the settlers in West Bank, is more valuable than the freedom of movement of Palestinians. This is not new. This is very old. We see it every day. We face it. Even me, when I'm walking with the settlers, are around, they prevent me from walking. Jewish holidays in Hebron, they prevent me walking even in the streets, which I use usually, so I don't go to my work sometimes because they close the streets to make the settlers walk in certain areas. So what Bingvir said, it's there, it's facts in the ground, but he exposed it to media, he exposed it to public, and he said it as a minister. So this is something very, very important to address, and I hope that I answered the questions.
Thank you so much for that, Issa. I want to turn to you, Hagit. We have a few questions that I want to kind of put together as I think they're important and they're related. So the first of them is whether there are lawsuits in Israeli courts to stop settlement expansion. That comes from Margot Rosenbaum. And then we have a question that actually is about something that I said in the introduction, but I'm going to let you answer it, Hagit. And the question is about the connection between annexation and the attack on the Supreme Court by this Israeli government. So if you could explain that, that's from Fred Berenger. And the last kind of related question to all of this, which is really important, is from Anita Dworkin, which is, given the numbers of protesters and marches in Israel, the protest movement, pro-democracy movement, is there hope for another election and a new government that's more open to living with Palestinians and stopping the settler movement? Are Israelis, the pro-democracy movement, increasingly making that connection between annexation and the attacks on the judiciary, Israeli democracy? So over to you, Hagit.
Thank you. Lawsuits to stop settlements. In order to go to court, you need a legal basis. And according to Israel's Supreme Court, settlements are not illegal. They didn't say it was okay either, but they did not say it was illegal. So just to say stop it, it's not something that you can do. What you can do, and what is being done all the time, is try to attack specific policies to make it harder on any kind of settlement expansion. For instance, what Issa mentioned, the 31 units that are going to build in the heart of Hebron, we, together with Youth Against Settlements, together with Issa, filed an objection to the plan. And then when it was rejected, we went to the court, and then we appealed to the Supreme Court. We managed to hold it back for, I think, two years maybe, but it was approved. As for the question of does the attacks on Supreme Court has to do with the annexation, with the occupation? I think it is clear, and I think it is also now clear pretty much in the Israeli discourse. It's not that the Supreme Court ever really stopped Israeli occupation. And if we wish that the Supreme Court will stop it, I think it's not realistic. The Supreme Court has been approving it. However, it is trying to balance, or to what in their mind is like to maintain some reasonable human rights or whatever under occupation. And this means that the government cannot really do whatever they want, almost. So for instance, one of the very important issues for settlers is to be able to grab more land. And the international law says you cannot just take private Palestinian land and take it for settlements. So you need to find ways to bypass this. And there are some cases that the Israeli tricks don't work. So settlers wanted to be able to confiscate this private land. So for that, the Knesset legislated the law that said that in some cases where settlers took the land and did it in good faith, then we can take the land and make it officially. And this law passed in the Knesset and went, of course, immediately to the Supreme Court, because we filed a petition, other organizations also, and the Supreme Court said this law is not constitutional and canceled this law. And this is only a very extreme example of a law that passed in the parliament that the Supreme Court said, no, this thing you cannot do. It doesn't mean that they don't find other ways to bypass this, but to do it in a wholesale way, they cannot. So if they can just push away the Supreme Court, they can now grab lands. And this will go on to many other and smaller things that are done on a daily basis in occupation, in, closed military zones, demolition orders, all that. If you can find a legal basis to stop it and the court will accept it, then it's bothering the settlements, it's bothering the settler activity. And, if you zoom out, occupying another people, millions of people, under military laws without civil rights is not only immoral, it's also illegal. And in order to be able to do it, you will have to do bad things, and you will have to have bad systems. And the Supreme Court, although it never really stopped it, it did make it harder in some aspects. So I'm sure that the occupation is one of the main reasons for what is going on today in Israel. And as for the question whether we see more Israelis understanding that occupation is a horrible thing and that it leads us to the end of what is left of the democracy. I mean, we have a democracy for Jews in Israel, but you cannot have democracy only for Jews if you have also Palestinians here, and I think people are starting to realize that. I think in the demonstrations that are really remarkable, I mean, in terms of how many people are going out and how many times they do, there are always this group of anti-occupation that are there to scream that democracy is not only for Jews, it's not only for in Israel, you cannot have a democracy in occupation. And I can tell you from Peace Now experiences that we have a WhatsApp group with activists that it's almost on a daily basis. We have more and more that are joining, that are from the streets of the demonstrations. But we have a long way to go. But I think it becomes more clear to more people.
Thank you so much for that, Hagit. We are just about at our full hour, our full allotted time, and certainly understand if some of our audience is going to have to drop off. But I do have one more question for any who are able to stay, if it's okay with our speakers, and for any of our audience that's able to stay. We have a number of audience members who have asked what I think is a very important set of questions around the role of the United States. And so what I want to ask from each of you, and this will be how we close out. Apologies that we can't take all of the other questions that I have to leave, unfortunately, in the Q&A. But I'd like to hear from both of you, and maybe Issa, we can start with you, and then Hagit, you can have the last word. What you would like to see in terms of U.S. leadership from the U.S. government, what you would say to members of Congress and the Biden administration right now, if you could, and also what you hope to see, what you do see now and what you hope to see from the Jewish American community and the role that we play, that you hope will play. So if it's okay, Issa, I'm going to toss that to you first. Oh, Issa, you have to unmute.
It's very important question. Thank you for this. But before I answer it, I want to say to Nabil Sater, we take your question. I second your comment that it's from day one, reality of, for me, apartheid and segregation and separation. And now this government is exposing the reality to the media and to the public. And for sure, the two-state solution was not completed. And if you look to the Oslo agreement, you will see that Israel was planning to keep control on Palestinians, economical control, control of the water, control of the electricity. They never had the intention to give us autonomy as Palestinians in the two-state solution. I wrote an article about it. You can read it online. I can send it to anybody wants, about the reality of the two-state solution, but it's one of the solutions. About the question. First, before I answer about the US officials, I want to say, there's a question, the same question about what Jews can do in the United States. I think that the Jews in the United States and the American people in general, they, as civil society, they can play a very important role. But I want them to visit and see the situation by their eyes on the ground and learn more. We want people who are really well educated about the situation to help, because anybody who's ignorant will damage. You need to understand the reality on the ground. You need to understand all the facts. You need to understand a lot and teach yourself. And then after you learn, be engaged with groups who are really working to make a change. Engaging with groups, it means more influence. You can make a change. My philosophy of non-violence, the gap between the Israelis and Palestinians is so huge. We can't make peace when the gap is, when the imbalance is so high. So we want to level up Palestinians. Leveling up Palestinians, be creative how to level Palestinians up. This is something very important. How you level up Palestinians? You think about how we can make the occupation costly as Americans, especially Jews. In the same time, how we level up Palestinians with education, with the economy, with art, with sports, with culture. We can level up Palestinians. Something else, level up Palestinian voices. In media, in campuses, in mosques, in churches, in synagogues. So we need more Palestinian voices to express themselves. We are not well represented, and we are not in the same time, we don't have the same opportunities to speak and to do advocacy, and it's very expensive for us. And for sure, donate to Palestinians financially, to especially Palestinian organizations, to make them grow. I see the settlers get a lot of money, but the anti-occupation campaigns, they don't get the same amount of money from Americans. What officials can do? Visit too. We want more tours. My dream is to bring Bernie Sanders to Hebron, and I hope that this will be one of our registered projects, to bring Bernie Sanders and other officials to come and see the real Israeli fact on the ground these days. It's very important. And conditional aid to Israel. Without real concrete actions to make the occupation costly from officials in the United States, it's getting much worse. This is we are not standing and waiting a solution. Israeli right wing and the fascists in Israel, they are killing our dream of any solution. By the way, I'm not talking about one state or two state solution. Any solution. There is, they don't want any solution. They want annexation. They want the land without Palestinians. They want Israel to be from the river to the sea, an apartheid state. This is what they think is right. This is what they say. Look to Ben Gvir, what he says. Look to Smotrich. Even look to Netanyahu, how he backs them up and how he tries to protect them. So conditional aid to Israel based on giving Palestinians freedom, it's very, very important. At the same time, we want aid to as Palestinians. We want help from the official help from the American administration, and to have the relationship between the American administration and the Palestinian people and the Palestinian leaders based on mutual recognition and a mutual civilian relationship. I want Palestinians to be treated as a nation, Debra. We are not treated as a nation. They treat us, as people who are looking for shelter or aid. It's not only that. I want the Palestinians to be treated as a nation who deserve full equality, who deserve freedom, who deserve justice. In this way, when we see the Palestinians as equal human beings, who deserve full rights as everybody else, as everybody in the United States, we can make a change. But conditional aid to Israel will make a huge difference. And this is one of the J Street main campaigns, to make Israel accountable for its occupation, for its settlements, for its human rights violations. And our civil society should push leaders to do that and make them learn more, and not to act according to their interest, and to stop the the intervention of many American leaders who are really supporting settlements, who are supporting very fanatic extremists. Last thing that Itamar Ben-Gvir last year and Baruch Marzel, their movement, Kahanist, were on the State Department terrorist list. Last year, they removed them from the terrorist list, and very high American official, ex-official, visited Baruch Marzel in his house in Tel Rumeda. So we want really to counter that, to do a lot of proactive proaction and proactive ideas, that we work together and support each other and protect each other, and for sure to post the Palestinian human rights defenders' voices to reach more Americans, to have a real mutual understanding of what's happening on the ground.
Hagit, before I leave it to you for the last word, I do, and thank you so much for that, Issa. I want to say two things very quickly. One, Issa, I couldn't agree with you more in terms of the importance of seeing the occupation and the situation on the ground with your own eyes. And I do just want to mention, many folks on the call will be aware, but one of the key activities that J Street does is to bring members of Congress to not only to Israel, as other delegations and tours will do, but also to take them to the West Bank. And I know you have met with members of Congress who have come with J Street on delegations, and we really do think that that's extremely important and has a really big impact. The other thing that I do just want to mention quickly is on the issue of aid. And Issa, it's certainly correct that J Street thinks accountability is extremely important. I do, for folks who may not be familiar with J Street's positioning, nuanced positioning on the issue, I do just want to clarify that J Street does support security assistance to Israel for legitimate self-defense purposes. However, we think that it is extremely important that we have more in place in terms of monitoring and oversight. And we also think it's extremely important that that security assistance only be used according to US law for legitimate self-defense purposes. And we're very concerned about evidence we see that that is not always the case in the West Bank. So I did just want to clarify J Street's positioning on that for our viewers. Hagit, I want to give you the last word on the same question, and then we're going to adjourn.
Yeah, thank you. I would just want to say that the occupation, the apartheid that is going on in the West Bank is taking Israel down. And even if you are already, tired of this issue, or you don't see the light in the end of the tunnel or any solution, and it seems so hard, we don't have the privilege to let go of it. There are people here, they are suffering every day from this occupation. And as I said, Israel is going down, and it might fall apart, my state. I cannot give up on it, and I urge you not to give up on us, and do what you can do to stop this occupation.
On that note, I want to thank all the folks, and it's the vast majority of our viewers who stuck with us an extra 10 minutes. Obviously, this has been a really interesting, important call. We could easily go on for another hour. We will certainly have more opportunities to talk about these issues. They're obviously not going away. Unfortunately, they're just getting worse. I want to thank so much our two speakers, Hagit Ofran, Issa Amro, joining us from his beautiful courtyard in Hebron. We are so grateful to both of you for taking the time. And of course, we're grateful to all of you in our audience for your great questions. And with that, have a great day, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.